Hello, my name is Pascal Michael. I'm a fourth year neuroscience with psychology student. And today I'm quite excited about being able to talk to you about something I'm quite passionate about, the near-death experience, as well as consciousness and neuroscience. Essentially, what might the near-death experience, or as I'll probably more easily refer to it as the NDE, what might it mean for the very concept of consciousness? What are the repercussions for consciousness? And what does neuroscience already know about this phenomenon? Or rather, what does it not know? So we really need to be talking from the same hymn sheet, really, as it were, as to what the near-death experience is. And essentially, it's a very characteristic type of experience which can occur after clinical death, or potentially near death, as the title indicates. It's simply during the process of dying. According to the International Association for Near-Death Studies, there's an approximately 10 to 40% chance of you experiencing a near-death experience if you are having a near-death episode. So it's a 1 in 10 chance, if you die and you're revived, that you will actually have an experience akin to this. You can't talk about this subject without really discussing this one individual, Raymond Moody, who's an American psychiatrist and philosopher. And in 1975, he wrote his magnum opus on this field, which really put the subject on the map, called Life After Life. Highly recommend it. In it, he chronicles over 150 near-death experiences. And he identifies these approximately 9 core aspects of the experience. So you can read them here at your own leisure. I mean, the ones which you'll probably be most aware of just when thinking of the near-death experience would probably be the tunnel experience and the light at the end of the tunnel, as nicely portrayed here in this picture. That's actually me, of all people, but I'm not actually dying. In Naples, in fact. It did feel like heaven on earth at the time, that's for sure. And also, like the life review, when your life flashes before your eyes, that's also quite a commonly understood aspect. And naturally, the return, the ultimate stage. Because naturally, technically, these people did not die, depending on your definition of death. I mean, certainly, a lot of these people, a large proportion, did undergo clinical death, but then they were then latterly revived. But the return, obviously, is an integral stage. So there are some examples here. Again, you can really skim over them as you can at your own leisure. Because I really would like to emphasize to you just how profound this experience is. Probably, I mean, I know before I got into this that I had a very limited understanding. I thought that skeptical. I thought that it was a trivial experience. But I want to emphasize that the more you read about it, the more you come to the impression that the last thing that is trivial. There's severe profundity to it. This is one of my favorites, the third one. No living person could experience such joy as I felt as I died. Think of the happiest moment of your life. That is awful pain compared to what you experienced. So I just thought that it really neatly encapsulated the real profundity. So what is the pertinence of the near-death experience for consciousness? Essentially, if indeed these experiences are happening during a significantly debilitated brain in the process of dying, or in fact after death, it really flies in the face of what you could define as the neurocentric paradigm for consciousness, i.e. that consciousness is experienced from the brain, is generated within the brain. So essentially, if you were to look at the very fundamentals of neurobiological physiology, and in turn the substrate, the very singular unit as to the alleged generation of consciousness, this video is a really beautiful rendition of this physiological process. So this is a single neuron, and you have this ionic flux, this flow of ions through the membrane of the neuron, This is what's called the action potential, what you'll probably be familiar with as the firing of neurons. And then ultimately it turns into, it creates a secretion of brain chemicals of neurotransmitters at the end of the terminal points of the neurons. And then these chemicals are binding to postsynaptic receptors, the activation of them, and then the cycle repeats. Another action potential fires. Now that's a singular neuron, but what's happening, the scale upon which this is actually happening in the human brain is where the human brain possesses 100 billion neurons. And each of these neurons can possess between 100 to 10,000 synaptic connections each. This is the scale that we're talking about. This is the gravity of this biological machine that we're discussing then, to such an extent that a single square centimetre of human cerebral tissue is going to contain the same number of synaptic connections as there are stars in the galaxy, in this galaxy, in the Milky Way. So one can say, as they often do, that we're all living in our own worlds, but the real fact of this incredible matter is that we're living in our entirely own universes. So this is actually my brain, if you can see. Can you see the resemblance? It's quite a private thing to just display one's own brain to everybody, but I thought that there couldn't be anything better than this, to really get home the point to you that what you're seeing here, me, everything that is me, is, according to status quo of the neuroscientific paradigm, is represented within that. Make of that as you will. So consciousness, it's an awkward question when it comes to neuroscience trying to explain normal waking consciousness, to say the very least. So we will later go on to talk about what neuroscience has in its arsenal as to explaining the near-death experience. So I'll get to that after talking about David Chalmers. David Chalmers, in this quote, he really encapsulates how difficult, essentially impossible, apparently impossible it seems, to locate the holy grail of these neurobiological processes, which can account for our conscious experience. So he's an Australian cognitive scientist and philosopher. He's coined this problem of mind from matter, consciousness from brain, as the hard problem, or as I prefer to call it, as the utterly intractably impossible problem, it seems. This is a very neat quote of his, which encapsulates it. I'd like to simply read it to you. Why is it, when our cognitive systems engage in visual and auditory information processing, we have visual or auditory experience? The quality of deep blue, the sensation of middle sea. How can we explain why there is something that is like to entertain a mental image or to experience emotion? It is widely agreed that experience arises from a physical basis, but we have no good explanation of why and how. Why should physical processing give rise to a rich inner life at all? It seems objectively unreasonable that it should, and yet it does. So, neuroscience, in terms of its attempts for explaining kind of altered states of consciousness, such as the near-death experience, it has a repertoire of potential propositions as to how it might come about. I'd love to talk about them all; they're all equally as fascinating. But I really would only have time to just focus on these last two here. So let's cover them in a little more detail. So Peter Fenwick is probably one of my heroes. He is a neuropsychiatrist at King's College, and he's also the head of the Division for Association of Near-Death Studies in Britain. And in 1998, he wrote a book called The Truth in the Light. And at the very end, well, he chronicles, I think it was over 1,500 near-death experiences, and he analysed them. And at the very end, he discusses possible neurobiological mechanisms for how these near-death experiences come about. One of which I found most interesting was the possibility that there is a singular unitary neural structure which is consistently implicated in these kinds of mystical experiences, such as the near-death experience. And the one that he chose to focus on for being very auspicious is the right temporal lobe here, which is right here. A potential God spot, if you will, as it's often been referred to as. So here, this list is a list of very quintessential experiences can be a part of the NDE, but also can very, very neatly dovetail with what we know as the functioning of the right temporal lobe. So beautiful music, beautiful harmonious music is often recounted from near-death experiences. And we know that the right temporal lobe, when it incurs certain lesioning and damages, that a condition known as amusia can come up, which is essentially characterized by the inability to comprehend, to appreciate music. Intense emotion, for instance, very integral to the near-death experience, almost ubiquitous. And the amygdala is an epicentral structure of the right temporal lobe. And that is one of the key emotional regulators of the human brain. The life review, the flashing of memories before one's eyes, this could be potentially very neatly ascribable to the hippocampus, which is this looping structure here, which is embedded within the temporal lobes. It's essentially, and the hippocampus, if you don't know, is essentially a kind of central spot, hotspot for the mediation of memory. Time distortion as well. Again, there's feelings of you can be dead potentially for 2 minutes less than, and you can have an experience which would subjectively feel to the person as an entire eternity. And we know also that damage to the right temporal lobe can precipitate a kind of subjective experience of a warping of time, kind of slowing down, fastening of time. Ineffability too. This is without doubt ever present when it comes to the NDE, a difficulty of really articulating exactly the experience that you had, and everything that you try to articulate it with just comes down to metaphor and symbolism. And this could be an argument for the fact that the origination of the experience could be the right temporal lobe, because it is the left temporal lobe, as you might know as well, the left hemisphere, which is more concerned with linguistic capabilities. So it's already looking extremely auspicious, but in addition, Wilder Penfield, he's often heralded as the father of modern neuroscience. He's a Canadian neurosurgeon, and in the 1950s he undertook a series of extremely groundbreaking experiments where he essentially he created a topology of the human cerebral surface by ripping open the skulls of patients and prodding with an electric stick and essentially correlating it with the experiences which were precipitated. You jab it here, oh, this guy's arm moves up. You jab it there, oh, he has hallucinations of his family. Things like this incredible experiences from this simple experiment. And so in doing so, when he stimulated the right temporal lobe, he emulated experiences that so often come about from right temporal lobe epileptics, as well as experiences which are quintessential of the near-death experience. So, such as flashing of memories, deja vu experiences, hallucinations, visual, auditory, sensations of tranquility, peace, dissociation from the body, such as the OBE, the out-of-body experience. So it is a very convincing hypothesis. The DMT hypothesis, or as you may have seen in the previous slide, is referred to as the DMT dump, which is quite an unfortunate term, if you ask me, for something so profound, simply to call it the DMT dump. So I've renamed it as the DMT deluge. So this guy, Ibn Alexander, he is a Harvard-educated neurosurgeon, and incredibly enough, in 2012, he underwent his own near-death experience, an NDE, which in all the readings that I've seen is probably the most profound and detailed. And he recounted it in his book, quite ostentatiously named Proof of Heaven. His near-death experience was precipitated by bacterial meningitis. And in his very own words, if there were any disorder for him to have incurred, to utterly disable his neocortex, which is Latin for neuroscience, which is essentially the outermost layer of the human cerebrum, and primarily concerned for hearing and vision. So in his words, it had utterly disabled his neocortex, and that's important to remember. So in the book at the end, like Peter Fenwick's book, he recounted possible neurobiological mechanisms for how his experience could have come about. And one of which I found most interesting was this DMT deluge. So DMT, or dimethyltryptamine, it is essentially the most potent hallucinogen psychedelic known to man. And it just so happens that another researcher, a neuropsychiatrist, neuropharmacologist, Rick Strassman, has hypothesized that the DMT is actually naturally synthesized within the human brain, specifically within the structure known as the pineal gland. This is a rendition by Descartes of the functioning of the pineal gland. And he was convinced by the fact that the idea that the pineal gland is actually the conduit of the human spirit, the conduit between the realms of heaven and earth. And now we have a world-leading neuropsychiatrist hypothesizing that DMT, the most potent conducer of these types of mystical and spiritual experiences, is actually synthesized within the pineal gland. DMT is very structurally similar to serotonin, and you're probably familiar with. DMT is dimethyltryptamine, serotonin is 5-hydroxytryptamine. So DMT functions in the human being by acting upon these certain serotonin receptors, such as of the neocortex. So in Eben Alexander's eyes, he essentially throws the baby out with the bathwater on this entire theory. He's entirely dissatisfied, can't wrap his head around the fact that his profound audiovisual, fully immersive, vivid near-death experience could in fact be generated by DMT action on the neocortex, and in fact his neocortex, his auditory visual neocortex, has been obliterated in his words. So it doesn't quite cut the mustard for Eben Alexander. So what lessons can we take away from this, really? Again, this is a quote from Peter Fenwick, summing up these kinds of possible explanations, neurobiological explanations for the experience. The very last line: a failing brain, a dying brain in the dying process, by very definition, may only produce experience which is limited, one that is confusional and chaotic. And the very opposite is true of NDEs. And of course, that goes even further when to say that these experiences come about in a completely dead person, a person with complete brain death, where their brainstem reflexes are no longer functioning. In all, I'd like to leave you with that photo. We can get bogged down, drown ourselves, think for eternity about philosophy of mind, about cognitive neuroscience. But if I will shift our attention just a little more to the near-death experiences themselves and the phenomenology of this experience, for them, it was a profoundly positive experience. A lot of us experience anxieties about death. But according to them, they will tell you quite categorically that they seem to understand death now. They have no fear of death any longer. And they are drastically improved human beings, it seems. They now cherish life, they seize life. And crucially, they so often come away with the knowledge that of all things that is important in life, it's actually love, which is so important. And I know this is an AU science journalism talk. It's not an excessively scientific concept to talk about love, They're not exactly researching love in the Institute of Medical Science up at Aberdeen University. But maybe they should, after all. So yeah, be like this blue guy over here. Take your loved ones out on a night in the town, because we're all going to die. Thank you.